Hey, this is Chris Crawford, Chris Crawford Knives, and I'm going to do a demonstration on how I make pivot bushings using my TAG micro lathe. So why use a pivot bushing? A lot of people don't use pivot bushings. Some people do use pivot bushings. You can make a perfectly fine knife with them or without them. The reason that I like them is because it helps me not bind the blade when I'm peening my knives together. The reason this works is because the pivot bushing will be just slightly thicker than the blade is thick. So for instance, if I had a 0.09 thick blade, slip joint blade, then I would make my pivot bushing 0.091. So I'd make it 1/1000th of an inch larger. This doesn't sound like much. It's small enough of a distance that when everything's peened together, you don't see any space between your blade and your liners, or your back spring and your liners. It's not going to be seen. But it is wide enough that I don't have to use shims when I'm putting the knife together, so I can just ping the knife together, ping the pivot, on both sides of the knife, and that 1/1000th of an inch differential between the pivot bushing and my blade keeps the blade from binding. Now, there's a difference between using a pivot bushing and using milled liners. The purpose of milled liners is so that when your blade opens and closes, the tang of the blade is rotating on the part of the liner that has not been milled. So it would be the same way. It would be like having an integral washer. It'd be the same thing as using a washer. Your blade pivots on that, and there's a cutaway on kind of the outside of your liner that prevents the liner from rubbing your blade and leaving rub marks on your blade. So that's the purpose of recessed liners or milled liners. That's not what this is about. This is about a bushing. So a bushing is a little bit different. The bushing creates a little separation for when you're peening the knife together. And also, by giving the knife a slightly larger pivot, theoretically, it would create a smoother rotation. Now, if you do want some more information on milling and recessing liners, I do have a couple of videos on that. You can check those out in my video tutorial section of my website or on the YouTube channel. So I did those, I don't know, a year or so ago, but you can check those out. Now, do you have to make, if you're going to use pivot bushings, do you have to make them yourself? No, you don't have to. You can purchase pivot bushings. In fact, when I first was talking to people who use pivot bushings and started wanting to try it out and start using them, I started looking at knife supply companies that sold them. And what I found was, on average, they cost around $4.50 to $5 each. Now, I guess in the grand scheme of what you sell a knife for, maybe that's not that much, but I have a bad problem about dropping things and then rolling up under the bench and I never see it again. And so I didn't want to just be throwing $5 bills away. So I got to looking into some other options. And what I found was that I could buy these 3-foot rods of phosphorus bronze from McMaster-Carr for, I don't know, around $10 or so. And so I can get a whole lot of bushings out of this rod right here. Now, there's a difference between the bushings that you purchase online and if you make them out of this phosphorus bronze rod. I think the ones that you purchase online are going to be, I think it's aluminum bronze. I think that's the alloy. They're going to be hardened. It's probably a harder product than the phosphorus bronze. However, phosphorus bronze is a bearing material. It's used in many applications as bearing material. Also, the phosphorus bronze, I believe, is going to be harder than brass. And I don't know if it's as hard as stainless. It's probably not, but it's going to be harder than brass, harder than nickel silver, which I've made many knives before switching to stainless with nickel silver pins or brass pins. So I figure at least on that it's going to be a little bit harder. Now, this is 3/16. I think maybe I already said that, but this is 3/16. When I use this, I turn this down to 0.172. I think the real number, it's like a 11/64 fraction or something like that. It's a really weird number, 11/64 or something. I can't remember exactly, but basically it's the fractional number below 3/16. So I buy a 3/16 rod, I turn it down to 0.172 .1781, whatever it is. And that's the size hole that I put in my blade. I'll talk about all that later, and I'll talk about why I do that. But that's kind of an introduction. So let's take a closer look at the blade and what we'll be doing. This is my blade that I'll be making the pivot bushing for. And so you can see I've got the larger hole in the tang. This is what I would start out with. This is my pattern. And it's got a 3/32 hole. And I'd use this 3/32 hole to do most of my fit up and everything before cutting or opening up the hole for my bushing. That's one of the things that I do right before heat treating. But here's the blade. So basically I take say this was my new blade I'm making. Get my 3/32 hole drilled, get everything lined up. And then I open that hole up with a number 19 drill. So this number 19 drill bit, as you can see, I'm going to go in backwards because I don't want to mess up my finish or anything. You can see that it's a little bit big for my hole, and that's intentional. So I'm actually drilling my hole undersized by using this number 19. So I drill my hole with this number 19, and then I do my heat treating. And then after I'm done heat treating, I come back with this Carbide Reamer, okay? And so this is a .172 Carbide Reamer. And so basically I just run it through there and ream my hole out and get it to the proper size. So this is how I prepare my blade for the pivot bushing. All right, this is my TAG micro lathe. There are other companies that make micro lathes. You don't even have to have a micro lathe to make these things. You could use a larger lathe, of course. This is out of frame, but I have a Harbor Freight 7x10 little mini lathe right back there. You might see a little bit of the red that I've pretty much retired since getting this. I bought this micro lathe pretty much for one purpose, and it was to make, I guess you call them Corby style bolts. There were only 3/32 in diameter, made out of like stainless 3/32 rod and tapped with all 80 screws for my dual action auto prototypes that I was working on. And so that's why I got this. That's the purpose. And I found many uses other than that for it. And that's usually how it goes. You buy a tool for one thing and you end up finding many uses for it. The reason I like this TAG micro lathe so much is because it is extremely precise. And I can make very little parts repeatedly on this thing and come out with good results. So let me just go over a little bit about it. When you purchase a TAG micro lathe, I'll just call it TAG lathe from here forward so I can quit saying micro, but when you purchase a TAG lathe, there's all kinds of options. You can get as few or as many parts as you want. I went ahead and bought the whole, I guess, everything that I could get, without being unreasonable with this thing. So, it came with I guess the head stock, the tail stock, this. One of the upgrades that I got down here is the auto feed. It's not really auto feed, but the lead screw, the feed screw. I got the board, came with the kit to mount everything down, and just I wanted to have everything that I needed for what I wanted to do, and so that's what I purchased. So I'll just run through this and show you some of the features real quick. Now, I do have a 3-jaw chuck that can go on there. Let me grab that real quick. So this would be the 3-jaw chuck that I could put on there. But when I'm using this pin stock and this small, not micro, but just this small rod, I like to use collets. And so I have a set of collets that I can put in there, which seem to hold it a little bit more secure. Now, the motor is just on a pivot here, so I can kind of pull it up and change. It's got a bunch of pulleys, so I can change the speed that way. So your drive pulley comes up here, drives this. There's a pulley on the back here that you can see that comes down to a wheel down here, and that's what drives the feed screw. And so depending on where I set my pulleys will depend on how fast the cutter advances on the lathe. So like I said, you got a collet right here. These are the cutters. So, you know, this goes this way or that way, like any lathe. One really cool thing, and I haven't seen this on other lathes, it may be on other lathes as well, but my cutoff is mounted upside down. So normally, like if I was coming down here and then I was going to cut this, cut this piece off, I would have my cut off on this side and I would run it into the rod and cut it off. Well, by having it on the back side, it has to be upside down, because if you think like everything's turning this way, right? So if it's on the opposite side, it needs to be on the bottom. But what that allows me to do is allows me to turn material right here and then turn around and run it back this way and cut it off without having to change my cutters out. So that's a really neat feature of this lathe. And then over here I got a drill chuck. This will come off. I have a live center that I can put in there. Basically, you can just move it up and down like this, and we'll be using it to hold our drills and our cutters and stuff as we make this pivot bushing. So let me show you real quick the way the auto feed works. The auto feed is kind of interesting. It works when you push the wheel in or when you hold the wheel steady, right? So like, let me just turn it on. You'll see. I'm going to get this wheel up, this kind of where you can see. So there it is running. Now, if you look, you can see this turning very slowly around. That feed screw is turning, and it's turning this, but it's not advancing. If I want it to advance, I just kind of push it in and hold it. And so now it's not turning right here. I have it really slow, but if you can see, this whole part right here is slowly coming in this way. The reason I have it so slow is because I want a really fine, really nice finish, and that seems to work best. All right, so we're ready to get started on the making of the bushing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to spot drill or center drill the piece of rod. And so I've just got a little micro center drill here that we'll put into the drill chuck. Tighten it down, and I want to move this as close in to my collet as I can without it touching. So I've got a little stop bar right here that will stop it. So you can see if I go all the way in like this, it's not, it's not touching. So I'm going to move that in, bring in my chuck as far as I can, lock it down, and we're just going to go ahead and just drill this, get a little hole started. All right, it doesn't take much. Okay. So we're going to take this out and put in our 3/32 drill bit. Now, on this 3/32 drill bit, you can see I've made a collar. I basically just took a 3/32 drill and drilled a hole through a piece, cut it off, and then I drilled I think a number 54 hole in it and tapped it with an odd 80 and put a little screw in there. And so basically what this allows me to do is it's just a stop so I can see how far I can go in. Now, if I wanted to check, I could adjust this to see, like, so here's my blade, and I could adjust it, to only go in so far. Now, you got to think about the drill kind of comes to a point. So I need to drill past the point, or at least till I get to the flat or the straight part of the drill shank, so that I get my hole all the way through. So that's why it's a little bit longer than what I need. And this is standard size. I just leave it at that. All right, so let's get this in. And if I were drilling stainless or any kind of steel, I would use some oil in there, but this phosphorus bronze is soft enough that I don't use any. Oh, all right, I didn't get my chuck tight enough. There we go. I'll use a toothbrush just to clear the chips. Basically just in and out until I hit my collet, my collar. Okay. So while that's still in there, I'm going to go ahead and ream the hole. So this 3/32, I don't know exactly what it is. It's somewhere in the area of 0.093 in diameter. This is a Carbide straight shanked reamer. This is a little bit larger. This is 0.0945. And so the reason I'm using this is if I were using some of my nickel silver rods, they would fit just right. But the stainless rods that I have in 3/32 are actually just a little bit oversized. So I bought the proper size reamer for that. So that's why I'm doing this. So just run it in and out a couple times. Doesn't take much. That cleans the hole up. And so we can take that out and slide this out of the way. And now we're ready to turn down our rod. Now, I could go with a 3/16 inch hole in my blade and just, use a 3/16 rod. Well, why did I go smaller? Why did I go like one fractional size smaller? Well, the reason that I did that is because if this rod's not perfectly round or if it's not perfectly straight, then by turning it, if it's not perfectly round or perfectly straight, when I drill my hole in it, there's no guarantee that hole is really going to be centered to the outside of the rod. So by going with a smaller hole in here and turning this down, then I can guarantee that my hole will be in the center. So hopefully that makes sense. So a couple of things that I do is, the first thing is I kind of go ahead and get an idea of how far I want to cut, okay? So to do that, I'm going to bring my cutoff in there and lay my tang right up against the cutoff. I'll move this light, get a little, move it right like that. And then I'll turn it out until I have, just a little bit more than my tang. I don't want to have to be sanding too much of this off. So that looks about right. Okay. So now I've got a screw on the back side of here. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I'm going to tighten that screw down, and that prevents this from moving. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a cut with my cutoff into my rod, and it's going to act just kind of as a stop, so to speak. It's like how far I'm going to go when I'm turning it down before, so I don't have to take too much off, basically. So let's do that. All right. So I cut it down pretty far. I try to be real careful not to go all the way as far as the hole, but you can see I cut into it there. And so now I can start turning. And I'm going to grab my optivisors real quick. It's a lot easier if you can see, especially when you're dealing with these small areas here. All right. So we're going to come in like this. I'm going to touch off and back it off just a little, roll it out. Oh, one thing I didn't do is, well, I can do that later. All right. Come in here, I'm going to touch off, come back out a little, come out like this, and then I'm going to go ahead and engage this, and I'm just going to go in just a little bit and take a few cuts until I get this top surface off of it. So I may actually just go in again and touch off and come back out. Go in just a little bit more. I'm going to engage it and let my auto feed run. You can hear that wah, that wah, 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 wah. It's because it's not even. This is evening it up. Okay? And so when you hear it quit making noise, it's because I've come off that. Now, I'm not sure if you can see my dial down here. Let me adjust the camera just slightly. Okay. So I'm at 46 right here. So this dial, basically, there's 50 increments. And these are, I guess, tenths of an inch. And so if you think about it, if I engage this in 1/10 of an inch, it's actually going to cut 2/10 of an inch off of my piece, because it's going to double, right? It's going to take off because because your piece is rolling around. That's how much it's going to take off. So at this point, I might go in. I'm going to back it up. I'm going to come off, back it up. I'm going to go back to 46. I might go to about 48 right here and run another one, and then I'm going to take a measurement and see where we are. So I know we're going to be pretty far off, but this will give me a good idea, and we'll be able to take larger cuts until we get close to what we're looking for. All right, and I'm going to disengage my handle down here so it stops, and make a mental note that I'm at 48. Okay, so I'll come off there. I'll come back over here and go back to about 48. All right, so let's shut this off. And I thought I had my micrometer over here, but I don't. Oh yeah, I do. Here it is right here. All right. So let's see where we are. I'll get this thing zeroed out. That's close enough. So what I'm what I'm looking for is to go down to about 0.172. So right there, I'm at 0.182. So I need to come down about 10 thousandths. So that's, or is that right? About 10 thousandths? No, about 10 thousandths. So that's going to mean I'm going to be going in 5 ticks on my little handle here. All right, but I'm not going to want to do it all at once. We're going to want to kind of creep up on it. So the first thing I do, I'll go ahead and go all the way to 0. So that's going 2 more ticks, which is going to take 4 thousandths of an inch off. So let's run that. Doesn't take real long to run it through here, even at that slow speed. Okay. Now I might go ahead and go 1 more. So this is going to put it about 6 over what we measured. Now, if you notice, the sound wasn't consistent. It was kind of wah, wah, like that. I think it's because I didn't disengage my lock screw a minute ago. I didn't disengage this, and I actually had this tight and was running it, so it might have thrown everything off. But we're at 1 right now. So let's check, see where we are. Okay, I'm at 178.9. So I'm going to take off. I'm going to probably take another cut of 2. So that's going to be, I'm going to run it backwards and then back forward. That's going to be 3 on my dial. And let me tell you, the reason you want to creep up on this is because it's very easy to overdo it. And if you overdo it, you're going to get slack. If you get slack, you're going to get wobble. in your blade, so you don't want to do that. Okay, so I'm making a mental note. I'm at 3 right there. Might have been at 2. So let's just check. Okay, we're at 76. I must have just gone down 2. All right, make a couple more passes. Then we're going to start checking it with our knife. So just going to go ahead up to 4. I apologize if this is getting boring, but you know, it's part of it. Okay, I'm at 4. So let's see what we get this time. Oops, I rolled it. All right, we're at 1727 now. I may have gone too far depending on how that micrometer is calibrated. So what I'm going to do now is start testing it with my blade. Okay, so you can see that my blade is kind of starting to go on there, but it's a little bit tight. Usually going better from one side than the other because these holes aren't always even, but okay, so it won't go in there. Now, on my dial, I was at 1. So do I want to go more than 1? Do I want to go all the way to, I'm sorry, I was at 4 right here. Do I want to go to 5? No, I don't, because this is my experience. When you're turning this, it's putting pressure on it. And so even though you don't see it, it seems like there may be some flex in the rod, or there may be some flex in this or something. So I can turn around and go back to 4 again and run 4, and I'm still going to take cuts. Okay? So I'm going to go to 4 and really just slide a 4 and make another cut at 4. So you can hear it, maybe. Just making some very slight cuts. Okay. We'll check it with our blade. Okay, need a little more. I always run when I'm coming back, I always run past it and then come back to where I want. Like if I ever go too far, I don't back it up because of slack. So I go back and then I roll it forward. So I'm going to put it right on 4, maybe just a little further. It's taking an extremely fine cut. Okay. See what we get here. Okay, I might need to go about 4.5 maybe. Oh, if I go in that way, it's a little better. All right. Maybe one more will do it. I've made many of these things where you just accidentally take a little too much off and then you gotta make another one. So I don't usually throw them away. I usually stick them in a drawer, and I can use them for test pieces or fit up pieces when I'm fitting knives up. Now that's going to be just about right. So that is nice and snug. That's just right on there. You can see that the blade can move on it, but it's not, it's not loose. So that's what we want. All right, now we got to cut this thing off, and I can honestly say that I need to sharpen my cutoff. It's it's getting dull. That's why it kind of cuts in increments. Like it'll cut a little, and you'll see it. But anyway, so this is the advantage of what I did before. So I can get this in here and get it right in that groove. Okay, right there. Back it off, lock it in. And for this, I use just a little bitty drill bit. I just stick in the hole and that catches it so that it doesn't drop and go under the bench. Never to be seen again. See how that's doing it kind of in little chunks? That means my cutter. If my cutter was good and my cutoff was good and sharp, it would just cut a nice ribbon. But there we go. Now, I'm going to set this aside. And usually, just for good practice, when I get that done, I'll come back in here like this. Touch off, come back, go a little forward. And I'll just clean up this face so that it'll be ready for my next one. By the way, if I'm doing bird's eye rivets, I also make them on here using the same 3/16 inch pin stock. But with a bird's eye rivet, I basically just drill a hole in it and cut it off. So I keep it 3/16. So now let's go look and see how we need to adjust this to be the right height for the blade. All right, I've moved over to my workbench to work on the pivot bushing to try to get it the right size for the right length for the blade. So the first thing that I want to do is measure my blade and see how thick it is at the pivot. All right, so I'm looking at basically 0.0898. So 0.09 is actually, that's what I said earlier. It's actually right where I am. So I'm going to say that's 0.09. So what that means is that I need to make my pivot 0.091. And my pivot bushing, that's how wide I need to make this, or how long I need to make this across here in order for it to fit the blade properly. All right, so first thing I want to do is take a measurement of this now, and being real careful not to drop it. Okay, so I'm measuring 0.135, so I've got a good bit that I need to take off this thing. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to do it with this tool right here that I got from USA Knife Maker called a, get it in the frame there, it's called a pivot lap. Okay, and it says Knife Dogs on it. Basically what this is just a puck. It's a disc that you put your pivot in, and you've got a plunger that you use to hold it down. So you put your pivot in there, you put your plunger in there, and then you just sand it away. And the nice thing about it is it keeps it flat. It keeps it parallel, keeps the sides, the top and the bottom parallel. Now with this pivot lap, there are several options that come with it. Like I've got the insert for 3/16, and you've got a couple more inserts. I think this is one, I think this would be a 1/8 inch insert, and the pivot that goes with it. I'm sorry, the plunger that goes with it. And then here's one, I'm not sure what size that is, maybe a 1/4 inch maybe. And so the little plunger that goes with that. So those go along with it. These things are awesome. Before I got this, I was trying to make some little pivots for an auto. I was having to shorten the length of an 1/8 inch pivot. And so I kind of made my own, and you can do that too. So this is a piece of just corian, I guess material like you'd have for a counter. I took a piece of 01, drilled it, hardened it so it doesn't wear away as easy, and glued it on there. I did that, and then I drilled through there and drilled a hole in there. And then basically it just made me a little piece of 1/8 inch rod, rounded at the top so it'd be finger friendly. And so I could put my 1/8 inch pivot in there, and got some sandpaper and put it on there and put my little plunger in and hold it down like this and go to town. And so you can make your own, but these are really nice and really convenient. So that's what we're going to use here. All right, now because this isn't actually 3/16, it's going to be a little loose in here. Okay, I'll try to get it where maybe, see if I can get it where you can see. Okay, I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's a little bit of space, not a lot, a little bit though. But because of that, I want to be careful how I'm moving this around. Now, I like to keep one side, like if this is the top side, I like to keep the top side until I'm almost completely done. The reason for that is that with this being a little bit loose in here, if I pivot it and I get it skewed a little bit and then I turn it upside down and I'm pressing on it, and it's gonna skew it because this is gonna be pressing flat on there, it's gonna skew it, and then I keep doing it, it's just gonna get off and off, more and more off. And that happened to me one time, and then I put the knife together and I couldn't figure out why my blade wasn't laying centered. It was like pushed to the side and I could not figure it out. And I'd take my blade out, and I'd set it down like this, and I would take a ruler and one of these with a 1/100th of an inch graduations, and I'd measure it like this and flip it over, and the blade tip was centered. I couldn't figure out why when I put it in the knife it wasn't. It was because my pivot, the top and the bottom weren't parallel. So I've been real careful about that since then. So it's a simple tool to use. Basically, you just get your sheet of sandpaper and put it on there like that. Get your pivot lap on top of it, put your plunger in, and just go to work with it. I just try to go different directions with it. Now, because I had so far to go, I'm not real worried about taking it down too far. But if you take it down too far, you got to start over. If I take it down too far, I end up sticking it in a drawer and using it for a thinner blade. But so let's see if we can get a measurement on this. See how much we took off. Okay, so we're down to 0.120. So we took about 15 or whatever it was off. So we'll just keep doing it. So wanting to get this thing. Now when I get down below 0.1, then I'll probably move over to my higher grit sandpaper. Try to sneak up on it. All right, let's see what we got now. Okay, I'm at 0.109. So I'm going to go with this for a little bit more. Now, one thing, since I've not switched this yet, there may be some burrs on the top surface that are causing it to read a little thicker than it is. So after this one, when I go to my 400 grit paper, I'm going to hit that top side and knock any burrs that I might have off there, and then I'll be able to get a truer reading. All right, I didn't take much off that time. 0.107. So you just keep at this till you get it the size you want it or need it. Try to blow the dust off, because even that dust will all right, I'm just taking a little off at a time. I think this sandpaper is kind of worn anyway. I would hit more on the edge over here because that is pretty worn. All right, we're at 98.9, basically 99. So I'm going to switch over to my 400 grit. I used to take this stuff all the way down to 800, but I honestly don't see the point of it. All right, I'm just going to make a couple passes just to kind of smooth out some of those, whatever this paper is, 120. And I'm going to flip it over, try to hit that top that I haven't been doing. And we're going to check it. Okay, we're at 95.8, and I've got to come down to 91. So we're going to start doing this a little less pressure. So is it, let's say 95.8. See how much we took off that time. So it's kind of slow going. Now 4.8, so I took one off. So I'll do a little bit longer. That's probably about one. All right, we're at 92.9, basically 93. We need to take, if anything, I may leave it just high, just over 0.091. Maybe not all the way to 0.92, maybe 0.91 and a quarter or something, but this is definitely when I want to try to rub the dust off so I can get an accurate reading. This is definitely when I want to go slow and creep up on it. Okay, 9185. So, I'm going to maybe hit it one more time. Light passes. All right, we'll go just a little more. It was 916, 0196. It is easy to overshoot this thing, and then it'll go in a drawer and it'll be back to the lathe. Okay, so right now I'm at 0.9115, so that's perfect. That's where I'm going to leave it. So it should just fit right in there. Okay, I may have to. Sometimes when you've been sanding, you know, back and forth like this, it's going to create a little burr right here on those edges. I take my little file and just kind of go around the edges. Oh! And it is gone. Let me see if I can find that. All right, I got lucky and found it. It went right under my shoe, so there you go. So let's see if we can just fit it in here without dropping it. Sorry for blocking the camera out. There you go. With that tight tolerance, it's just really got to be in straight. So there it is. Oops. So it's got a 3/32 hole reamed so that the pin will go through it. Now what happens is when you put this in your knife and you ping your pin, what actually happens is your pin swells up and the bushing locks to the pin. So when the blade is pivoting, the blade is actually pivoting on the bushing, not on the pin. And you're not going to be able to tell it. I mean, if you look at it, if I pushed it in, all the way to the bottom, well, there it came out. Pushed it in to the bottom like that, and you looked at it, it's 1/1000th of an inch thicker, so you're not going to see that. But that right there is going to make enough of a difference that when I ping the blade together, I don't have to use shims. And if I don't go too crazy on it, I don't have to worry about the blade binding. And that might be a little tight, and then you break it in, you work it in. There'll be no wobble in the blade. There'll be no wobble in the blade like this. There should be no wobble like that. I mean, it's a slip joint, but no wobble like this. But it should have a good enough pivot and enough clearance that it walks and talks. All right, so there you have it. That's how I make pivot bushings for my slip joints on my TAG micro lathe, and use a pivot lap to sand them down to get them to the appropriate thickness to go into the blade. Like I mentioned before, since I started using them, I've not quit. I mean, I will continue to use this method because I love it. It makes putting the knife together so much easier. Hopefully this information will be beneficial if you want to try to make your own, or maybe you say, I don't want to fool with all that, but I want to buy some and try that. If you do buy some pivots, you're still going to need a pivot lap so that you can get them down to be the proper size for your knife. So anyway, I hope this helps. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.